Well, it's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. I have with me in the studio lecturer from the University of Lagos, Dr. Dan Ekere, and in-house analyst Obani Akinwale. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, let's head straight to the papers now, and we begin with the Daily Times. 2020 budget, ministries, agencies, overpricing projects. Lawan says National Assembly will ensure uniform prices for similar projects of MDAs. Reaffirms earlier pledge that 2020 appropriation bill will be passed in December. To the front page of News Direct, federal government to commence minimum wage payment December, pays arrears from April. We'll be looking at that story shortly. Well, to the front page of the Blueprint, Nigeria's judgment death now 150 billion naira. Malami seeks 2.5% commission on recovered loot. Senate will soon summon ministry officials on 9.6 billion P&ID. Well, finally, on the front page of the Daily Trust, revenue crisis, tough measures inevitable. Federal government, Senate warns against more borrowing. 5.4 trillion naira lost to tax evasion annually. FIRS, experts, SMEs react. All right, gentlemen, look at the story on the front page of News Direct. The federal government has agreed to commence payment of the minimum wage from April, and that will begin in December. You know that NLC, Organized Labor, was pushing for this, and finally there seems to be an agreement here. There's no back and forth with regards to this. But the challenge for many, or the concern for most people, is state government's ability or capacity to pay these arrears from April. I'll start with you, Obani.
Let me say it's interesting to see the trend of how the system obey the law. If the federal government said they assented to the bill to improve the life of workers as far back as April, and we're still contemplating and we're still giving instructions as to when people should implement in December, it's cause for concern. And it's just a replica of Nigeria, or our constitution, that says we the people of Nigeria. Now, we the people of Nigeria have signed since April, and we are still deliberating on when to pay. Then again, is how many of these states at the moment are paying full salary? How many of these states are paying pensions and arrears? How many of these states I'll give you an example. Ekiti State just want to start a project of about 60 billion for the airport. And you ask yourself, how are they going to sustain such projects, and how are they going to be able to pay salary? You see, if federal government has passed a law and they have rated a scale, don't forget, each state will still domesticate what is possible in each state. And I stand to be corrected. For some of the states in the southwest, possibly Oyo, Osun, that are civil service states, and for a state like Kogi, except President Buhari give another round of bailouts, I can tell you for free.
Which was given?
He just gave about 10 billion recently.
Yes.
I am telling you now that most of those states will not be able to meet that arrangement. And it is high time, like we said, that we need to tinker with our constitution and make it work. In a federal system whereby everybody has to go hand in cap to the central, and the same central that is increasing salary, don't forget, is going to collect 52% of the allocation. And vis-a-vis, you compare the number of federal government staff as compared to individual states, you discover the disparity. Yeah. So the moment you begin to hand over what is state to state, and everybody begin to look inward, if it's only Gari that I can produce in my state that will sustain my state, I will employ Gari employers, and I will pay their salaries.
And that is why I come to you, Dr. Ekere. Some have said that issues of consequential adjustment or issues of even minimum wage should be subject to the capacity of each state and not something that is unified, because the capacity of each state varies.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is true, but true to some extent. It's because the challenge we really have is that of, being a federal republic and not federating. I think that's the major challenge. Because if we operate a federal system, there will be no basis for even the federal telling the states what to pay. And that will equally mean that the states have access to their resources. They should be able to explore whatever they have and, take care of themselves. They should do remittance to the center. But in this case, the federal government is the one who
determining
who presents a picture of a Father Christmas giving what ordinarily he does not have. That's a challenge. So when you have this kind of situation, federal government is saying, okay, this is the minimum wage. Although generally too, you equally have the attitude of our governors is another challenge. Even when the money is there, some of them have this, habit or behavior of this is my father's something. So, you want to operate like your personal estate. We must, begin to make, specific demands on full operation of a federal system. So that will mean,
and who should champion these demands? The NLC, the people, who exactly? Because questions are being asked as to how to move forward from here, seeing that it is no longer sustainable.
Yes, it's clear to everybody. And this is not a matter of NLC. It's not a matter of governors. It's not a matter of ministers. It's everybody. It's affecting all of us. But the challenge again is that those who are already at the various, positions are enjoying the system. So it is now left for us who are suffering, the brunt of this particular, system to rise up. Nigerians must demand, the true federating, pattern that we have already signed into. Not this idea that the military has brought upon us that you call it a federal state and yet we operate as if we're a unitary state. So that will help. So that the question of we are not able to pay and all of that should not arise. Because I do believe that every state in Nigeria is endowed enough to pay this minimum wage. As a matter of fact, there are states that can actually pay more if only they are given the proper environment to operate freely. And again, if they equally know what they are doing, those who are in charge of governance.
When you say know what they are doing, how do you
because
mean?
so many of them don't even bother about anything called IGR.
Yeah. Now that leads me to my next question. Governors, because there was a time the vice president said that governors need to begin to think outside the box.
Yes.
Well, we are not seeing that. We are not seeing the push.
How do you think outside the box? I would take Doctors' Constituency for an example. I was reading an analysis by one of the newspapers over the weekend where it says the governor has cut down subventions to institutions by almost 60%. My alma mater, LAUTECH, we've been on holidays for almost 7 years. Who will pay when and how? Now, if you are now trying to ask them to review the salaries, don't forget that these are states that are unable to meet the current wage bill of an institution with their current earnings. Now, by the time you increase the wage bill, I'm afraid that if you find out now that what the government are doing now is just to go and create revenue-making institutions. TechU in Ibadan, 600,000. Uni-Osun, 250,000. You find out that education system is now becoming a marketplace. So how do we state government drive IGR when FRS is all over everywhere? When Lagos water is being regulated by National Inland Waterways? When the airport tax is being collected by Federal Airport Authority? So you find out that some of the areas where some of the states are supposed to generate revenue is being controlled by the central. And you find out that that's why at the point in time, Lagos were asking that if you are generating 70% of non-oil tax in Lagos, why can't you vote it back? Because if you are giving 13% derivative to this, to that, you discover what is happening in Zamfara. They discover that federal government will be the one to license the gold miners. Federal government will be the one to sell the gold. And people now started doing illegal mining. Yeah. And you see what is happening, the boundary that you have in Bayelsa and in Zamfara today. Same thing happened in Niger Delta. So the moment the federal government begins to take their hands off what they said is in the exclusive list and make a lot of things more concurrent, and again, allow states to generate whatever they have, and you remit back to the central, you discover that you will know who you are supposed to employ. Otherwise, what you find out is that at every 26, 27, 36 guys will go and sit down together with the State Minister for Finance, and they will tell us that they have shared this amount of money. Just imagine, even within Lagos, local government cannot fix a kilometer of road. It's as bad as that. And the same local government, you now want to tell them that they should increase the salary of their workers. At the end of the day, you and I will be demanding for them that common street light you cannot do, this you cannot do. So we are at the moment, at the point whereby every Nigerian need to ask every elected officers whether they are supposed to be there. And like Senator Dino Melaye said, he said very soon, children of the poor will be chasing them. And it is very clear now because...
But we don't have to get to that point.
So we are there
We are
already.
there already.
No,
They are stoning them already.
What is kidnapping about? You know,
What is banditry about?
the signs are clear. They are so ominous. And
But it seems they are not reading the signs.
No, they will never read the signs until they die. That is the problem. You know, so it is when a big person is affected that they will not realize that there is a problem in the land. Look at what happened the other time. You know, as if that was the first time people were being killed. That was not. But because they know that this one can speak, they know that this one can say something that will move them. And so they started doing all manner of, you know, short-time arrangements. But the truth is that we must operate as a federation. Like Chief Obafemi Awolowo said, that where you have this kind of, you know, mixture, and both landmass and all of that, the only appropriate thing to do is to operate a federal system. And we shouldn't operate a federal system just by mere, you know,
Words
word.
of mouth.
It has to be indeed. We must operate it, you know, to the basics, such that the states must have access to their resources. The state should be the one to determine what to do with their resources. And whatever they generate is, why should we be having, you know, federal primary school, federal secondary school, federal, I mean, for me, it's nonsensical. So I think we need to really go to the basics and ensure that while talking about minimum wage, we address the major issues that will actually make that, you know, foundation work. Which is about federating and every state, you know, driving its own resources.
All right, Dr. Dan Ekere Obani Akinwale, thank you for your time on TVC.
So it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And it's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers this morning. I have with me in the studio a lecturer from the University of Lagos, Dr. Dan Ekere, an in-house analyst, Obani Akinwale. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So we'll look at stories making the headlines in today's newspapers. The Nation newspaper says here, federal government sets December deadline to pay minimum wage arrears. The rider says Ngige states private sector must obey law. NYC members to benefit, says Minister. Daily Times newspaper here says 2020 budget, ministries, agencies overpricing projects. According to Lawan, says National Assembly will ensure uniform prices for similar projects of MDAs. Reaffirms earlier pledge that 2020 appropriation bill will be passed in December. The News Direct is saying federal government to commence minimum wage payment in December, pays arrears from April. The Blueprint says Nigeria's judgment debts now 150 billion naira, says Malami, seeks 2.5% commission on recovered loot. Senate will soon summon ministry officials on $9.6 billion P&ID. So we'll go to the Daily Trust this morning. It says revenue crisis, tough measures inevitable, says federal government. And Senate warns against more borrowing. 5.4 trillion naira lost to tax evasion annually. That's according to the FIRS. Experts, SMEs react. So we'll look at the story in the Daily Trust newspapers this morning. Revenue crisis, tough measures inevitable, says federal government. Senate warns against more borrowing. 5.4 trillion naira lost to tax evasion annually, according to the FIRS. Experts and SMEs react. So, gentlemen, tough measures inevitable, according to the federal government. What's your take?
Let me say the tougher measure should be on the wages and allowances of the executives and the legislators. And I can tell you authoritatively that if there are tougher measures on the number of aides for every executive member and every member of the parliament, we'll have better revenue.
Okay.
A couple of weeks ago, we discussed about Italian parliament trying to cut down their wage bill. An African country in place of Liberia have taken the same measure. They are cutting down the number of parliamentarians, cutting down their wages. In Nigeria, we're increasing the number of our parliamentarians' aides. We're increasing the number of ministries and MDAs. So even if you have the best of revenue generating agencies, you have the best of MDAs that will spend the revenue that is not available. Then again, I keep saying that the issue of borrowing is not a problem. The best economy in the world are the most indebted economy. Call it China, call it US. Even the pride of Africa at the moment, Rwanda, if you look at their current debt to their GDP or even to their forex, it's about 60%. So borrowing is never a problem in Nigeria. The problem is borrow to do what? Then again, is borrow and implementing what was borrowed for. Look at Lagos. Fashola borrowed to do Lagos railway line for a couple of years. Generating revenue via those rail lines, you know how many millions or millions of dollars will have been Lagos State's coffer. Now look at Badagry Road, this line they follow. You know how much they were borrowed to revamp the airports before this man, Buhari, was in power, the president came into power. So borrowing has never been a problem for any economy, but the challenge is that borrowing and using the money effectively. And in terms of having a tighter or people evading tax, who are these people evading tax? And who has allowing them to evade tax? It's people within the tax system. You find out that within FIRS or internal revenues of state agencies, there are people that will compromise the system to ensure that private pockets are blessed as compared to getting the money to Commonwealth.
Okay, but you're saying that more countries borrow to develop themselves, but the Senate is warning against borrowing, and if we borrow, who bears the burden?
Yeah, because the Senate are aware of where the money goes to each time they borrow. I think that's the reason. So the challenge is really not about the act of borrowing per se.
Okay.
Because check out even the so-called multi-billionaires. They all have one debt or the other to service. You know, I recall the days of Sanusi. That was where we even got to realize that so many of these so-called multi-millionaires are billionaires. We're actually feeding or living on bank loans.
Bank
and the
loans,
rest.
yes.
You know, so it's not about borrowing. It's about how what is borrowed is utilized. Look at the ones we take from World Bank, IMF, wherever. Each time this money is come, those agencies who actually give them these monies know that we are not going to use them to better our lot.
A $3 billion
so they get
for
something,
electricity.
All of that. Each time we borrow it, those who are lending it to us will collect a reasonable percentage of it because they know that you will not be able to make any noise about it because you are not investing it. You know, so the challenge is about how you plow that money you are borrowing into the economy. So it's a major challenge. Now, we are talking about tougher measures, you know, with respect to the so-called crisis in, revenue generation. And my worry, sometimes you hear FIRS telling you that within 1 quarter, we've generated so number of billions, even trillions.
And yet,
and at the end of the day,
5.4 trillion is lost to tax evasion. How do
so
we raise
how
revenue
how
if we have this
did
kind of
how did
situation?
you even get to know that such money is lost? Because it means that you have some money. And you now know that somebody stole it or you threw it away somewhere. How do you get to know about such money? Lost from where? How do you, I mean, so sometimes this so-called statistics baffled me. Now, are you saying that there are persons who ought to pay tax who are not paying, who should have been up to this amount? Then you are at fault. If you already know that we can get as much as 5.something trillion from somewhere, and you have failed to do, and you are still sitting comfortably and talking, you know, you should be ashamed. So I'm worried about the way we relate all these things. You know, so the challenge now is that if we must address issues with respect to matters of, tougher measures, then the first thing to do will be to actually cut down the cost of governance. That is a major waste.
We have always said cut down. The governments have always said it's going to cut down cost of governance.
Yes.
Also, recently, reducing the number of people that follow the government, travel and all of that. Is that not a measure?
What measure? Now President Buhari traveled to South Africa how many days ago? Where is he now?
He traveled to Russia.
To South Africa how many days ago? South Africa how many days ago? Where is he now? The wife of the president, where was she? Where did she return from? For how long? Well, then they know he's with her. See, enough of, as I said, enough of government trying to grab headlines. And sometimes when they grab these headlines, they always shoot themselves at the leg. Because there is no way you tell me that you are ensuring that you are cutting costs and you have increased your ministry from what it used to be to 46. There is no way you tell me that you are, just to imagine that the appointment that was done yesterday, somebody was asked to become the NCAA Director General, who was the former technical advisor to the minister. So in the first place, we require a minister when we require a technical advisor. So another person has now been deployed again as a technical advisor to the minister. Then you have essays to the minister, yet you are cutting down costs. How? So the fact remains that until, like I said, we place our ministers and their essays and what have you on level 14, level 16 salary, you discover that nobody will go there. See, the best way to make money in this part of world today is to be in government employment. I mean, be a consultant, be a director, be a political appointee. Because how do you explain that you said we should make a tougher measures in generating revenue when MDAs are going to create essays and what have you within the ministry? Just yesterday, Ministry of Communication was changed to Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy.
Yes.
So
Very soon, we'll have special advisor on digital economy. Don't forget, we're gradually going to mobile money.
Yeah.
So very soon, there will be a department and agency that manages mobile money. And when you have that, you have director of mobile money. And you have technical advisors on mobile money. And yet, you are cutting costs. How?
How did we start in all
No,
of this?
but again, let's look at it this way. Each ministry, all right, has its own, and members of staff. That particular office of the minister, even when the minister is not there are people in that ministry that can do that job itself. Okay. What do you need? SAs and PAs
SATs,
and all the TAs and
SSAs.
all the A's, all right? What do you need them for? Can they be members of that ministry? Okay, people who already know what to do about that place. You are now appointed a minister. Get one of them to do what is the job of the SA and the rest of it that the members of that ministry who are already earning salaries cannot do. So these are just ways of trying to, kick back to their boys and girls who perhaps have added one support or the other. And that is a first thing to do, because the question of cutting travel times to 8 times or whatever is not an issue, really.
Okay, at this point, can we actually now cut down costs?
How?
Is it possible that the government reduce
the first thing we need to do is that we need to
change. Do we do that?
How do we do it? First, let's stop this bicameral system of government. 2, let's make parliamentary job a part-time job and pay them on salary like you pay every other persons. Now, if you want to come to parliament, nobody should get you a house. I know when you are coming to office this morning, TVC did not give you a house.
And will never give you.
So if you are the one looking for your house, you will find a way of getting yourself down to work. I don't see any reason why somebody else that is employed to do a particular job, the government should be responsible for that person housing. Don't forget, they have domestic staffs. They have domestic staffs. So first, let's not save costs from these executive and legislative wastages. Then from there, we can now come down that the cost of governance has to reduce drastically to the barest minimum. You have SA to chief of staff. You have secretaries to chief of staff. You have head of protocol. By the time we cut all this head, and what have you, you'll be able to streamline the cost. You look at our budget, you find out that at every point in time, recurrent is always high. Every time we buy new plates in Aso Rock, every time we buy new spoon, every time we buy new computer, you now ask yourself, is it that the computer they are buying is only 6 months, or the Chinese are the only 1 year? Or the spoons, once you use it once, you can't use it again.
Because computer can crack.
Let us start from there.
Cutleries.
Let us start from there. The moment you stop buying cutlery every year in the budget, for both National Assembly and the executive, we have started saving money.
Even if you are using cutlery to eat an elephant, right? The cutlery will not go with the elephant.
We need to be objective and we need to be sincere with ourselves. But if you continue to grab headlines and say FRS knows, the law are very weak. So what the law says is that if you allege that somebody steals, onus is on you to go and prove. So if I say you are owing me tax of 1 billion, onus is on me to prove rather than for you to say, show me how much you have made and tell me what you have paid, which is supposed to happen. But it's a reverse in this country. If they allege that you have done this thing, whoever alleges must be the one to prove that this has happened. So you see a lot of somersault. So the first thing is that the presidency, the National Assembly, even the judiciary, they have to be first sincere with ourselves and ensure that we cut all those wastages and ensure that the system works well. From there, Nigeria will begin to thrive. Power will begin to work. Obasanjo invested $16 billion on power. Till now, we are still investing on darkness. Buhari is going for another 3.7 billion on national grid. Yeah. Don't forget, as we speak, federal government is subsidizing all those power agencies. The gas they are using is funded by federal government. So what you have just, like you mentioned, is that get money from the World Bank, all right, give it to the boys, and again we go back hand in cap, begging them, and we continue to increase our debt burdens.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Obani Akinwale and, of course, Dr. Danny Carey. Thank you so much for talking to us on this.
It's always a pleasure.
It's time to take a look at stories making the headlines in Nigerian newspapers. I have with me in the studio lecturer from the University of Lagos, Dr. Danny Carey, and in-house analyst, Obani Akinwale. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
All right, we begin with the Nation newspaper, and it says federal government sets a December deadline to pay minimum wage arrears. Ngige states private sector must obey law. NYSC members to benefit, says minister. To the Daily Times now, 2020 budget ministries, agencies overpricing projects. Lawan says the National Assembly will ensure uniform prices for similar projects of MDAs. Reaffirms earlier pledge that the 2020 appropriation bill will be passed in December. We'll be looking at that story shortly. To the front page of News Direct, federal government to commence minimum wage payment December, pays arrears from April. And on the front page of the Blueprint, Nigeria's judgment debts now 150 billion naira. Malami seeks 2.5% commission on recovered loot. Senate soon summon ministry officials on $9.6 billion P&ID. And finally, on the front page of the Daily Trust, revenue crisis, tough measures inevitable, federal government. Senate warns against more borrowing, 5.4 trillion naira lost to tax evasion annually, FIRS. Experts, SMEs react. All right, gentlemen, we'll be looking at this story on the front page of the Daily Times. The Senate President reacting. Ministries and agencies are overpricing budgets. And he's like looking at the fact, the economic situation, so to speak. Why are people still engaging in things like this? Or why are ministries and agencies engaging in things like this, really?
Yeah, I think we should also sometimes allow some certain part of Sharia law to play in our National Assembly chambers.
Really?
Yeah, some of our senators require flogging. And
wow.
If you don't flog them, they will not stop saying certain things that are not only provoking, but they are insulting and they are inciting.
How do you mean?
How do you explain that the ministers or the MDAs are overpricing their budget when the National Assembly budgeted over 150 billion for 469 members? Now, let's do a calculation that you have a population of 200 million and only 469 is taking almost 150 billion. So who is first overpricing? That is one. The distinguished Senate President, Senator Lawan, he's been in the National Assembly since 2003 at the House of Rep. He's been in the Senate for almost 12 years, and I'm sure he has collected SUVs in the last 16 years consecutively. Yet he budgeted 50 million for SUV4. So who is over budgeting? Sometimes these guys just come out to parade themselves as nationalistic, truthful Nigerians.
But that doesn't mean he shouldn't raise an eyebrow when there is a situation like that.
How do you say MDAs? We said something earlier in the last review. We said if the presidency every year budgets for cutlery, and is that an MDA? If the State House Clinic cannot take care of the ailment of the wife of the president, why are we budgeting for the State House Clinic? So you keep asking this question and you said, who are these people fooling? Who are they fooling? Let us ask the Senator Lawan that in what part of the world is it that lawmakers must create constituency projects? As a lawmaker. So you find out that the problem lies with the National Assembly themselves. The moment they decided to leave their responsibilities to be check and balance for the government, to be people's voice, and turn themselves to house of making money.
So are you saying he shouldn't raise an eyebrow?
What eyebrow is he raising? Because it's part of the system. So you cannot tell me that the MDAs are raising money when they are aware that you're also budgeting 50 million every 4 years for yourself. Don't forget that these MDAs are serving these people, and they will still go back. Don't forget that the former House leader's problem, our operational leader, that the man from Bebeji Kano constituency, had problem because of what they call budget padding. Who are they padding it for? You remember during Obasanjo tenure that they said Ghana must enter before budget had been passed. You know how Buhari insisted that money will not exchange hand this time around. You must pass this budget. We understand what Buhari passed through during Bukola Saraki's tenure. So if these people are now coming out to tell us that MDAs are increasing salary, you know how much you are getting as a revenue. You know as debt servicing. You have committees and commissions that manage this project and look at the expenses. You have also the Auditor General of the Federation.
So they have no basis to be making this
This is just ordinary noise. See, sincerely yours, they should concentrate themselves more with the job of lawmaking than doing the job of public relations. That's what they are doing now. I'm telling you.
Dr. Kerry, do you share the same view as Nei here?
Yeah, in fact, that was what the first thing I wanted to say was to say that the National Assembly is even overpriced, over-budgeted for, and everything. Because you just look at the cost of making law in Nigeria. The cost of making laws that in most cases are not even kept. Every day, then the main laws that are important are not being passed. are not even being addressed. And you are talking about agencies and the rest of. So if you already know that this thing is happening, what have you been doing in time past? You know, because from the statement, it's like that has been the tradition.
And we should also consider the economic situation.
So the first thing would have been that, okay, even our own, we are over budgeting, we are overpricing.
Where can we cut down?
So let's start from here. You know, there is a way you deal with yourself on certain issues, that when you want to deal with others, people will respect you. But that has not been done. We are still paying so much for making laws that are not kept. And the other ones, some of them even have direct impact on the people. Those are the ones that you feel are being over-budgeted for. You know, or overpriced. Overpriced. And
like
so I was expecting that you give this in a holistic approach. You should have started from even the cost of lawmaking. I think is beyond the bearable
But
level.
we cannot throw away the baby with the bathwater. These issues
baby?
have to be addressed.
Yeah, certainly. But when there's a baby, you obviously will take care of the baby.
Of course,
but this one is all bathwater.
There is no baby, there is no bathwater.
Yes, because when you look at the whole thing carefully, the cost of running governance alone, the cost of governance, general, of which the National Assembly is part, we have been complaining. We have been complaining about that. The first thing to do would be to start from there, because that is where a major chunk of the money goes into. SUVs and the rest of them that are not necessary. SUVs they be buying every 4 years and the rest of it. The same now, and because they buy these SUVs all the time, they are not even interested in the state of the roads.
Because they do not feel the impact.
They don't feel it.
Because
So we have to start from there. Let's address that issue. From there, you can tell the MDAs and the rest of them face to face that this cannot. Well, we know a bag of cement is 2,000 naira. Why are you budgeting 4,000 naira and the rest of it? That is where you start from.
Right.
You know, because you are the one who eventually vet this budget. You are the one who will pass it. And sometimes you even ask for money to pass this in. Sometimes when you go on what do you call it? Oversight functions like Farouk Lawan, is it not Lawan? Integrity that eventually became something else. They will be asking for money from $10 and the rest of them. Those are the kind of challenges we are having. So deal with the self first. Once you've been able to establish that particular aspect, people will respect you. When you speak, Nigerians will follow you. Nigerians will rise with you. But when we know that all you are doing is just showman, you know, obviously, you'll be addressing any critical
you wanted
issues.
to say something?
So what I wanted to say is that when these our distinguished and our honorable members just resumed, we recall that they asked Federal Capital Territory Authority to assist them in settling down. I don't know how many civil servants in Abuja that the federal government is aligned to settle down. You recall that the National Assembly said they are going to issue loans to these new members to be able to secure apartment. I don't know how many Nigerians have access to loan to secure apartment to their place of work. Then again, you remember that this same set of National Assembly were on holidays for almost 60 days after inauguration. Yet they will be paid for those 60 days. And you and I will work sometimes Monday to Sunday, and you discover that your calculation is sometimes 21 days. And these kind of guys will not, they hardly sit up to 180 days in a year. And they are being paid for 1 year. And even when they travel on assignment, they are paid for what they did not do. They pay for tea they did not drink. So what you find out is that before National Assembly could come up and say MDAs are over budgeting, what happened to the National Assembly Parliament issue they are building for almost 8 years? Budgeted for every year, not completed. So these are just people that just come up to say things that, like I said, our National Assembly has now turned more to a PR company than a legislative chamber. Because what they do more is that they are fighting, is that they are dancing, is that they are saying things that it does not even, there is no way you can marry what they are saying and what they are doing. I can bet with you that those people that sat yesterday, where they were talking about MDA's money, they will collect sitting allowance. You have all of them, they are elected to be our representative. They will still have PA on budget, A budget B to collect allowances. So you keep asking yourself, why don't you first cut down on your own expenses? Why don't you also cut down on cost of governance at the National Assembly? Why can't the National Assembly member stay in the interior of Abuja and be paid as a regular Abuja civil servant? Then from there, you can now ask executive that this and this is not possible. But situation whereby you are budgeting over 150 billion for 469 Nigerians at the detriment of about 200 and something million. And yes, don't forget, salaries will not be paid to civil servants. But yet, the allowances and the Board of National Assembly, there's no constituency that has its budget fulfilled 100% at National Assembly. their salary is not delayed. And again, the same National Assembly that is complaining, if you remember, the workers carry placard just a few weeks ago that they are not paid. Yet you are complaining that the MDS. A lot of things to talk about.
I can see that you gentlemen are really vetting out.
Let it not be misunderstood.
All
We
right.
shouldn't misconstrue,
Yeah.
you know, the position to mean that we are against the National
Not at
Assembly.
all.
No, we are speaking about the National Assembly because that is the only body that you have elected representatives.
All right.
Apart from the president and the vice president who came on a single ticket of, you know, running mate and the rest in the executive are appointed. But these ones that we sent there, obviously, whether we voted or not, at least the bottom line is that it is by election.
Yes.
Okay? They should be able to speak our mind. Exactly. They should be able to represent us. That is why we are concerned about them. It's not about trying to rubbish anybody.
No.
It must be understood.
Absolutely.
You know, but the truth is that what we have said is not outside the truth. You know, so the National Assembly need to rise up to the occasion. They need to see to it that Nigerians benefit from the sweat, the effort we put into electing them, particularly queuing under the sun or whatever, even with all the harassment. They should live up to expectation.
All right, live up to expectation. I'm certain they are listening to all of this statements that you gentlemen have made. Thank you, Dr. Daniel Kerry.
Thank you,
and
it's a
thank
pleasure.
you, Obani Akinwale, for your time on the Newspaper Review.